Some humiliations don't shout, they arrive the way winter does in Winnipeg, on the breath. On the windows. On the hinge of a door that suddenly needs your shoulder. If you've ever stood in a hospital kitchen at 5 in the morning with the steam rising from a pot and the light buzzing like it has somewhere else to be. You know the small ways a day teaches you its tone. You stir. You check the cooler log. You tighten the hairnet. And you decide that no matter what a person calls you later, you will have fed somebody before the sun remembers us. That is the promise I make quietly to the day. Sometimes the day keeps it. Sometimes the day sends you to a room where people clap for the wrong story. My name is Nora Belanger. I am 56 years old and I run morning prep for the cafeteria at St. Boniface Hospital. My job title says supervisor. But my job is to keep a small kingdom from boiling over. Sauces at safe temperature. Eggs that don't argue with the pan. A staff who need a look more than they need a lecture. I live in a semi-detached on a quiet street where the snowplow forgets us until just after we've dug ourselves out. By the back fence I have a stubborn vine that gives me tiny grapes with more pectin than sense. I turn them into jam that tastes like someone remembered August. In the evenings, a few nights a week, I clean a law office that thinks dust is a rumor. On Sundays I cook soup for the church pantry, lentil when the budget apologizes. Chicken noodle when the congregation remembered their wallets. If you come into my kitchen at 5:15, you'd think you hear routine. The truth is, you're hearing decisions that have already been made. I start the kettle, not because coffee solves anything, but because the first sound should be something that knows its purpose. I pull the HACCP binder and write the cooler readings in tidy numbers and sign beside them. Because if you don't write it, it doesn't exist when the inspector arrives. I check the onions because they are honest about their age. And I chart the day in the back of my mind, breakfast specials. The nurse who likes extra toast. The dietary restrictions for the endoscopy unit that will come down at 7:30 with their briskness and their thank yous. My son, Adrian, is 27. And he is a founder. That's what they call it on the internet when you have a logo and a deck and a room you can rent by the month. His company is called Door North. It is an app for finding things to do with people when you are tired of your own couch. He writes code he only half trusts and does deliveries at night when the invoices sprout delays. He lives not too far from the Exchange District, in a place with brick that wants you to believe in your own angles. His girlfriend is named Kelsey, and she knows how to say brand in a way that makes it sound like oxygen. If I sound like I don't approve, forgive me. I know what it means to want something that requires you to invent the stove first. When Adrian first told me about Door North, I said what mothers who work say, show me your costs. He showed me a spreadsheet that had manners and optimism. The optimism annoyed me, the manners made me help. I co-signed the first lease on the co-working space because the credit union knew my name and Adrian's had not learned to sit up yet. I lent him money during COVID when clients fell back on their own couches and forgot to pay a boy with an invoice. I let him keep his car insurance registered at my address because the discount was real and I believed the lie that such things don't matter if nobody looks. I collected these small exceptions like a woman collects coupons, pressed under a magnet. Justified by weather and love. When the invitation came for the Door North launch, I folded it in half like a person who wants to make a thing fit. It was an email, of course. And it had a poster attached that showed happy people on a roof I could not afford to sweep. Launch party. It said in letters that already had a hangover. Exchange District Hub. 7 p.m. drinks and demos. Under that, in a message box, Adrian wrote, "Mum, you should come, but please don't wear your kitchen uniform. And maybe keep it low-key?" Investors will be there. I read that line 3 times. It smelled like a boy who loved me and a man who wanted to rent distance by the hour. I stood in front of my closet and tried to find low-key. Low-key is a language I can get to within 1 shirt and 2 pairs of shoes. I chose a blue sweater that forgives my shoulders and black trousers that behave in chairs. I took the bus because parking is arrogance in the Exchange on a Friday night. Winter had started flirting with the air by then. Your hands complained when you forgot your gloves on the counter. I brought a tin of ginger cookies because every room becomes more humane when sugar meets flour and heat stands up straight. The co-working space was one of those big old buildings whose brick remembers stories people forget to pay for. The lobby was lit for the internet. There was a step and repeat banner with Door North and 3 logos of sponsors I only half recognized. Kelsey floated toward me like a person trained in the art of entrances. She wore a blazer that knew how to be 2 things at once, expensive and not an apology. "You made it," she chirped. "So good. Could you help the catering crew? The kitchen's just down the hall. We're super tight on space for the front of house." She said it lightly, like a woman dropping a tissue into a bin. I held my tin of cookies and thought about how most kitchens are at the back, not because of tradition but because it is easier to decide where you want people after you decide what you want to sell. I smiled. I am good at smiling in rooms that would prefer I arrive as a service. "I'll find him first," I said. "I won't get lost." Adrian looked like he had borrowed shine from a magazine. He saw me and the part of his face that still belonged to my kitchen lit up. He hugged me, careful not to rumple the story his jacket was telling. "Mum," he said, soft, then leaning away like the room tugged on a leash. "Thanks for coming. Just be chill, okay?" He made a face that tried to be affectionate and managerial. "Don't comment on the brand page. It makes it weird. Professional vibe tonight." He laughed. So did the boys with him. It was the wrong kind of laugh again. My cheeks did their job. My hands held the cookie tin like a prop that could teach a room about gifts. I took myself to the kitchen because there's always honest work there. The catering team was already in motion. One woman calling orders in a voice with authority and tenderness. I asked how I could help. She gave me a tray of crostini and a brush. "Olive oil. Light. Don't drown them. You from here?" "Saint Boniface," I said. "Mornings. I do breakfast for people who need it." She nodded like this was a sentence the oven understood. There is a thing that happens when your body finds a task it knows. Your edges settle. I brushed oil. I lined the tray. I put them into the heat and took them out before the second guessed the first. The room moved around me, music that was trying too hard to be ambient. Laughter with nervous bones. A microphone tested in a language that hasn't had to boil potatoes. At 7:30, Kelsey tapped a glass with the confidence of a drum major. The lights shifted. People clapped because they were trained well. "Welcome," she sang, then introduced my son, her hands presenting him the way a magician presents a dove. Adrian took the mic and made a room I did not own his. He thanked sponsors. He thanked the city in the plural. He spoke about STEM pathways and hustle and how there will always be doors in the north if you know where to knock. He told a story about scraping up gas money and delivering in blizzards to prove to himself that he was serious. He said, "Not everybody believed in tech, you know? Where I come from, people think you work a job and that's enough. But I was too embarrassed to stay small. You can only be defined by your past if you keep that past around." The room laughed and then clapped. I stood by the doorway to the kitchen, the tray of crostini cooling against my palms, and listened as if attending a eulogy for a relationship still breathing. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. Shame plays charades without having to stand up. He moved into the demo. The app did what apps do when the person with the clicker believes in possibility. People oohed. One investor type asked a question about churn that had learned manners. Adrian answered like he had borrowed a suit for his tongue. Then Kelsey closed the demo with a line about community. And someone turned the volume up on the playlist so we could all pretend the room had done what it came to do. I washed my hands 3 times. Because it is what I do when I need to feel useful and clean. I took the tray out to the table by the wall and pretended to fuss with the napkins so I didn't have to look at the part where a mother tells a son that words are sticks even when somebody painted them. He found me anyway. "Mum, you good?" he asked, hugging me in that useful way men learn when cameras are near. I know that story annoyed you. But it's just a story. Everyone gets it. He spoke in plural again. It didn't fit him. "Don't make a thing," he added under his breath. The kind of sentence that has flipped many tables in smaller kitchens. I said, "I have a bus to catch," and he nodded like we had negotiated a treaty. I carried my tin home without opening it because some gifts are meant to be consolation when the room forgets your name. On the bus, I watched a boy in a hoodie share his earbuds with a girl in a coat that had learned resilience. I thought about how many kitchens had taught those two to clean up their plates and say thank you with their eyes. The exchange passed in that way it does: brick, history, hope, wind. At home, I took off my sensible shoes and put my sweater over the back of a chair in violation of my own rules. I poured a glass of water because the voice the night had given me tasted like a person who forgot to drink. I sat at the table where I pay bills and I opened my binder. When I am sad, I reach for paper. I wrote down what I knew the way a nurse writes down vitals: exact, dull, useful, lease, co-signed, car insurance, address still mine, visa, supplementary card charges, photo lights, backdrop, 3 brand jackets he cannot afford but wants to wear like they mean he is what they say. I added the older wounds. That December when the power bill arrived at his student apartment with angrier numbers than usual. And I had paid it because the light doesn't care if you believe in yourself. I wrote them in the margin because I knew I would need them later, and I also knew I should not carry them to bed like weapons. My phone lit up with a message from Adrian at midnight. "Please don't comment on the Door North page." Okay, it read. "Investors read everything. It's kind of embarrassing." He added a heart and a laugh. I looked at the heart so I would not break the screen. I wrote back, "Sleep well. Congratulations. I'm proud of your courage." Then I set the phone face down because I didn't trust it not to make me someone I'd be embarrassed for later. Morning arrived with the honesty of a kettle. I'm not the sort of person who calls in sick. The hospital remained a place where people expected toast to behave and eggs to be themselves. I boiled water. I peeled potatoes. I checked temperatures. In the quiet between the rush and the next rush, I opened my email and found 3 notices posing as politeness. The landlord at the co-working space had sent a reminder that the lease would auto-renew in 3 weeks with the same guarantors unless otherwise notified. The insurance company had sent a cheerful notice verifying my multi-vehicle household discount, complete with the address I now understood was useful to more than one person. And the credit card company had sent a happy little graph showing brand growth in my supplementary card usage. The graph was an optimist. I printed all 3, the kind of woman who knows what paper does for the spine. And I put them into a red folder I had kept for taxes and recipes I didn't want to lose. There is a point where the body knows it will be okay because you have a plan. Even if the plan is just to make a list. I made a list. It was not revenge. It was grocery shopping for my dignity. Under bank, I wrote, "Call credit union about removing my name as guarantor." Require 2 signatures on any joint transfer. Cancel supplementary card. Under insurance, I wrote, request an endorsement stating that Adrian's address is not mine. Remove him from any discount related to co-residence. Request a letter. Under door north, I wrote, talk to Adrian about repayment for charges. Freeze non-essential help. No use of my address. Ask him to remove any story implying his entire origin is self-funded. Under me, I wrote, make soup. Call Sister Bonnie about pantry schedule. Remember to breathe in through nose, out through mouth. Take the good cloths out of the dryer and fold them like they'll be asked to do something important soon. It was as if the night had stood up on 2 legs and decided to test me some more. That afternoon, when my hands were busy making chicken salad the right kind of small, my phone pinged with a message I wasn't ready to read. It was from Kelsey. Nora, so appreciate your attendance last night. The message began, cheerful as latex balloons. Quick request. Can you avoid posting comments on the Door North FB page? We need to maintain a polished tone for investor relations. Also, Prairie Startup Awards are next month. We've got a big table. We'll handle all comms and family stuff ourselves, so don't worry about coming. Keep being your amazing self. I stared at the exclamation point like it owed me an apology. Then I remembered where I was and that knives in any room know how to be honest when a hand does. At the end of the shift, I took my binder and my red folder home in my old backpack. The one that used to carry permission slips and crushes and now carries facts. The snow had dusted the front steps. The vine by the fence held the last of its dried leaves like a person who forgave summer and winter at the same time. I brewed tea because a small, hot cup of water with leaves provides proof that good still wins sometimes. Inside my binder I keep a small envelope for things that threaten to slip. I put the lease reminder there with a sticky note, call credit union. I put the insurance letter in the red folder under a tab I labeled with a black marker, insurance. I put the card charges under a tab labeled card. I added the post-it I had written the night before, keep it dignified. Keep it true. That evening, because I am a person who believes in dinner even when the world forgets manners, I fried onions and stirred rice and built a pot of pilaf that could forgive a day. As it simmered, I opened Facebook to check the pantries page. It is one of the places where I still recognize the world. People ask about soup. People ask about coats. People ask whether the pantry will take gluten-free pasta that tastes like cardboard. On my own page I saw that the photo I had posted last night, just a blurry shot of the brick and a proud caption, had been untagged from the Door North page. I saw that 2 of my comments had been hidden. There is a silence you can feel through a screen. I did not chase it. I stirred the rice so it would not stick. I tell you these small pictures not because I want anyone to scold a young man on my behalf, but because when humiliation arrives, it rarely comes dressed for the opera. It shows up in exclamation points and untagging and a woman in a blazer asking you to keep your mother in the kitchen. And if you answer it with loud, you join its choir. I intend to sing elsewhere. After dinner, I walked to the little credit union on St. Mary's because I like my banks to be a short walk and a first name. Painted pumpkins still guarded the doorway, survivors of a fall that had tried its best. The woman at the desk has known me since Adrian was a boy who wanted to buy every hockey card at once. "Hi, Nora," she said, and meant it. I asked about removing my name as guarantor when the lease renewed. She nodded. "We can send the landlord a notice. They'll have to re-underwrite the tenant without you. Do you want a letter confirming the change?" "Yes." "Do you want 2 signatures required on any transfer over $500 from your accounts?" "Yes." Do you want the supplementary credit card closed today? Yes. Do you want an alert on e-transfers? Yes. She printed things. I signed things. I left with paper. Paper is a coat you can wear when a sentence has made you cold. The next morning before my shift, I called the insurance company. I told them the truth. My son no longer lives at my address. Any discounts associated with that untruth should be removed. Please send me a letter that says so. Of course, the service representative said, kind as a person whose script had been written by someone who knows mothers exist. We'll email and mail. I added a note to my folder in the margin. Underwrite trouble for boy if he lies later. Not as a threat. As a reminder that I have kept too many rooms tidy to pretend mess is a personality. At work I moved through the breakfast rush. The kitchen loves you back when you treat it like a place that can forgive you. An elderly man with a cane ordered oatmeal and told me a joke about a doctor. I laughed like a person who collects jokes because they carry you over potholes better than most trucks. The day did what days do when you insist on showing up with a towel. Then came the call that makes a mother's mouth go dry. It was the landlord's office from the co-working space, young and full of hardness. We've received notice that the guarantor is withdrawing at renewal. The voice said, we'll need confirmation from the tenant they can carry the lease. Otherwise, we'll require a new guarantor or we'll terminate. It was a sentence intended to scare me into stepping back into the story as the wallet. I did not. That's fine, I said. Please send everything in writing. My involvement ends upon renewal. My voice had learned from hospital kitchens how to behave around boiling water. I messaged Adrian. I have asked the credit union to remove my name as guarantor at renewal. I have also cancelled the supplementary card. We can discuss repayment schedule for your recent charges. We will also need to update your insurance address. I watched the dots appear and disappear like shivering. Why would you do this now? He wrote. We're close to a funding round. This is embarrassing. I stood at the metal table where onions survived knives and typed. Embarrassment is when the bill still has your mother's name on it while you tell a room you built yourself alone. I erased it. Instead, I typed, it's time. We'll sort it. Call me after 6. He did not call. He texted. Kelsey says we should focus on the awards. Investors hate family drama. Let's not cause a scene. I put the phone in the locker and cooked lunch because if you feed a hospital you are allowed to ignore a screen for a little while. On the bus home I watched the city behave like itself, salt. Breath. People holding each other's elbows so they don't slide into traffic. I thought about drama and scenes and how both get tired faster than a person who can fold a cloth right. At the table, under the yellow light that forgives my face, I pulled the red folder close and opened a new tab with a black marker. Witnesses, I wrote. Under it, credit union letter. Insurance endorsement. Lease reminder. Card statement. Then I made a smaller list. The one with teeth. Times I paid his rent. Money I sent during COVID so he could keep the phone that kept hope alive. Proof of the car insurance discount with my address. The time I paid a power bill so the radiator could keep pretending it liked that apartment. I knew I would not read this list out loud in a room. But I needed to read it to myself so that the voice in my head that keeps saying, "Don't make a fuss," would finally sit down and let a woman stand up without being called dramatic. That night, I folded the good cloths so each leaf of cotton gave me another clean square when I refolded mid-task. I cleaned my sink. I made myself write a sentence on an index card and taped it to the inside of the red folder's cover. Facts. Not feelings. Papers. Not posts. Then, below that, another sentence. Smaller. A thing I knew I would need when his voice in a suit came at me. When a blazer explained that a mother is bad for vibe I am not a scene. I am a ledger. You might want the first episode of this story to end in a confrontation, a mother interrupting the speech. A microphone learning humility. That belongs to movies where soup never boils and a matinee solves everything. Out here, where frost chews the corners of a window frame and the kettle earns its noise. Endings get set up with binders and pens. I am a working woman. I do not throw plates. I set tables. The next table is larger than my kitchen and more public than my preference. Prairie Startup Awards. RBC Convention Center. Q&A microphone. 2 minutes for the community to ask the founders what their decks forget to mention. The rules at my church say, if you say a thing about yourself in public and it makes the world more false, the women in the kitchen will fix it with food or paper. I have chosen paper. I will keep my hands from shaking by doing a chore first, peeling carrots while the kettle finds its song. And then I will put on my blue sweater because it knows how to cover and permit. I will not make a scene. I will ask one question. And I will bring what questions deserve. Documents. He may call it embarrassing. I will call it daylight. I will not insult him. I will read what the credit union wrote. I will read what the insurer wrote. I will say that the story of self-made tastes better when we salt it with the people who stood behind a stove and a lease. And I will leave the room quietly when I am done. Because some truths do not need to linger to work. Some days don't begin, they resume. You pick up where you set the towel. The pan. The pen. The air has a memory of yesterday's onions and your hands have a memory of what they promised. When you are a woman who works, there is a relief in this sameness. Every repetition is a vote for the life you meant to have. But there is a second relief I have learned to cultivate in middle age: paper. Paper remembers on your behalf when the room gets loud. Paper waits quietly on a shelf until someone believes a performance more than a receipt. Paper will never be impressive. And that is exactly why it wins. 2 days after the launch party, the one where I learned my son thinks embarrassment can be avoided by keeping your mother out of the frame, I set the kettle. Pulled the HACCP binder. Logged the cooler temperatures. And then went to the little office at the back of the hospital kitchen where a cheap printer can make a person feel unafraid. I printed the credit union's email confirming they had noted my request to remove my name as guarantor at the end of Dornorth's lease term. The letter was so polite it could have joined the choir. I printed the car insurer's confirmation as well. We have updated our records to reflect that Adrian Belanger no longer resides at my address. Multi-vehicle household discount removed. Those are not the sort of sentences that climb onto a stage. They are the sort that keep a man from falling off one later. At lunch, while the tray line breathed between waves, I called the landlord's office for the co-working space. There is always a tone you must earn with these offices, if you sound too soft. They teach you a lesson, too hard. They become the lesson. I found the middle. The way I do with soup, heat high enough to be efficient. Low enough to keep from burning. I asked that they put in writing the terms if the guarantor was withdrawn and whether the lease would auto-renew without fresh underwriting. The woman on the line answered in a voice that held both the script and her own fatigue. We'll need updated financials for the tenant. If not acceptable, we issue notice. She promised a letter. I thanked her as if we had concluded a thoughtful conversation. She is not my enemy. Debt is. When I returned to the line, the younger cook asked if I was okay. The younger ones always notice because their eyes have not yet learned to be lazy. I said I was fine. And I meant it in the way I mean it when a pan is almost clean, some more circles and we will be. I told her to check the internal temperature on the turkey. And I watched her do it with hands that did not assume the thermometer would lie just because the clock wanted to hurry. After my shift, I stopped at the credit union because sometimes you should look your courage in the face while it is still warm. The manager, who has been kind to me for 15 years without ever mistaking that for overfamiliarity, printed a letter on letterhead with the words we agreed to in the email. She also asked me if I wanted to set up dual authorization on e-transfers from my accounts. 2 signatures on anything over 500. She said, and an alert even if it's less. I said yes. She printed again, stamped again, slid me the paper with that small smile women exchange when they have moved something heavy without asking anyone to admire them. Tape it to the inside of a cupboard door. She suggested. The cupboard will tell you if you forget. I did not forget. I slid the letter into my red folder under a tab labeled bank. I slid the insurer's letter under insurance. I punched holes into both with the hospital office's hole punch as if not trusting the papers to stay of their own volition. I have learned this. Dignity can be filed. Dignity can be tabbed, cross-referenced, and made portable. That evening I made a stew that forgave the day. The kind that sits on low heat and pities your shoulders. I ate at the little table that has tolerated more bills than birthday cakes. And I opened a second notebook. The nicer one with the hard cover that makes you sit straighter. On the first page I wrote, sacrifices, because euphemisms get you nowhere when you are listing what a woman gives away in the name of love. I wrote without embroidery. I sold Eamon's truck after he died because one vehicle in a house of one person is an insult to a driveway in winter. We used that money to cover Adrian's tuition at Red River when the counselor told him that if he wanted to code, he could write his way into a life. I paid 3 months of late rent in a year when the landlord's patience would have cost more than interest. I covered a hydro bill for a student apartment that hated its own radiators. I put $200 a week in his account for 8 weeks during the first pandemic spring because Dornorth's clients had suddenly discovered how comfortable a living room can be. I co-signed a lease for an office with skylights because Optimism asked to share a desk with Math. And Math got lonely. I allowed my address to carry his car insurance discount long after his shoes stopped leaving snow at my door. None of these were crimes. All of them were choices. Writing them down was not a trial, it was a way to stop pretending. On the next page I wrote rules and copied from the index card I had taped into the red folder. Facts. Not feelings. Papers. Not posts. Then I added the ones that would protect me from the part of myself that still wanted to be liked. No more untagged discounts. No more co-signing without fresh underwriting. No more stories told to rooms that do not pay my hydro. No more using my name to prop a brand that has forgotten its own ground. The days leading up to Prairie Startup Awards found their own way into hurry. I do not rush well, rushing insults the work. But I prepared at a pace that made the work feel carried. I made an appointment with a lawyer at a small office down the street from the church. She has a voice that says, "Let's make things boring," which is what you want from a person who drafts wills. I brought her the red folder and the nicer notebook because I have learned that the right props summon the right mood. We made 2 decisions over tea. The first was to send a letter, brief, dull, enforceable, telling Dornorth to stop using my address for any purpose and to remove any implication that Maple and Mop, my side cleaning work, is a partner or sponsor. The letter did not accuse, it asked. The second was to update my will. I am not rich. The house is a rental. The RRSP is modest the way honesty is modest. But I have work that people trust. And I want that trust to outlive me. We wrote a clause that creates a tiny trust if Maple and Mop continues after I am gone. A percentage of net earnings to the pantry and to the winter coat drive. A hiring preference for women over 50 because the world loses its mind around their competence. A prohibition on lending the business name to any promotional content without written. Signed. Boring consent. For Adrian. I wrote a small, unconditional bequest because decency is cheaper than bitterness. And I wrote a separate letter to be filed with the will that said, in my own words, that my son owes me nothing but truth and repayment of specific sums if he wants more than that. We included a no contest clause. Not because I think Adrian would sue me, but because even gentle sons can marry ambition and wake up thinking litigation is romance. When we were done, the lawyer slid the draft to me and said, "Do you want to add a line that says you prefer to keep family matters off social media?" I laughed. It sounded like a rule you would put on a bulletin board at a daycare. "Add it," I said, "so that everyone who opens that folder knows that if they drag me there." They did so against my last known wishes. While the documents simmered in her office, I continued with my errands. At the insurance broker, I asked for the endorsement on paper, not just in email. At the bank, I asked them to reprint my new transfer policy on a second letterhead to place in Adrian's folder because sometimes you help a boy behave by making sure he can't pretend he didn't remember. At home, I printed a little one-page document that said, "Repayment Schedule, Proposed," with lines for dates and amounts and a note that said, 0% interest if you keep your promise, interest if you don't. I signed it. I left a line for him to sign. I did not attach a speech to it. Some papers deserve to be handed over like a sandwich. You either eat it or you don't. And everyone can tell which you chose by looking at your hands. What surprised me most that week was how many small forces conspired to make me feel like I was ruining something by refusing to continue being convenient. Kelsey sent an email with the subject, "Brand Harmony," which is a phrase that made my teeth itch. The body of the message was an impressive collection of soft verbs. Could I refrain from commenting on certain posts just until their positioning had landed? Could I trust the process and let the young team own the narrative at the awards? Could I sit this one out in the audience and celebrate from the wings? She CC'd Adrian and wrote, "We've got this," with a sparkle emoji. I read it twice, then printed it, then wrote with a pen in the margin, "I am not a narrative. I am a ledger." I did not reply. I stapled it to a copy of the insurance letter in the hope that proximity would teach her vocabulary better manners. Adrian sent me 3 texts that week that all meant the same thing: "Don't embarrass me." He didn't use the word, he would have thought himself kind. He wrote, "Keep it smooth. Don't blow things up at the awards. Let's talk after." When I asked for a call to finalize a repayment plan, he sent, "Can we do later? It's been crazy. We'll be flush soon." Flush is a toilet word. I do not use it to describe finances. I wrote back, "Come by Sunday at 6. I'll make stew. Bring your laptop. We'll fill the schedule lines." He replied with a thumbs up, which is the emoji of men who have not yet learned that a mother's time is a resource. Sunday arrived with church and potatoes and a sense of humor. I cooked for the pantry and delivered the soup tubs to the basement kitchen, where Sister Boniface inspected them with a satisfaction that would have warmed any accountant. Back at home, I laid out 2 bowls, 2 spoons, the repayment schedule with a pen, and a small stack of receipts organized by month with paper clips that looked like they took themselves seriously. 6 o'clock came, then 40 passed. I texted, "On my way," he wrote. 7:30 he arrived, the breath of apologies trailing like a scarf. He ate quickly. Stu does not argue. I slid the paper to him with the pen on top. "The way you slide a check to a waitress you like." He laughed, a gentle laugh that had done him many favors at women's counters. "This is so formal," he said. "It's just us." "It is us," I said. And my voice did not ask permission from anyone in the room. That's why we're going to be adults about it. It's not punishment. It's an end to improvisation. He signed. He did not make a speech because the stew and the pen had conspired to make speeches feel foolish. He took a photograph of the paper with his phone. He asked when he should send the first transfer. Friday. I said. $250. Then every Friday until that column is full of checks. He nodded. He was quiet in the way men are when their tongue is thinking bigger than their voice. Before he left, he tried one more line. Just don't do anything at the awards that will make it weird. He said. I looked at my own hands so that I would not look at his fear and adopt it out of habit. I will not do anything weird. I said. I will do something true. He hugged me and kept the hug long enough to be tender and short enough to be convenient. When the door closed, I washed the bowls and set them upside down to dry on a towel. I wrote, "First transfer Friday," on a piece of paper and stuck it into a little pocket in the red folder so it could not claim amnesia in the morning. If you are waiting for me to feel like a villain, I will not indulge you. I slept like a person who found her pillow after a shift. The week bent itself toward the awards on its own. I answered no invitations. I bought no new sweater. I packed the red folder as if I were going to visit a relative who respects me. Bank letter. Insurer letter. Lease renewal reminder. Repayment schedule copy. A small print out of the event page with the Q&A rules circled, 2 minutes. No personal attacks. Questions must address the business. I practiced my voice saying my name into air so the barrel of the microphone would not turn me into an echo. At work I asked the younger cook to handle the grill for a day because I wanted to teach her the rhythm of an egg order when the hospital is impatient. She did well. Her hands found their own insistent truth. Between shifts, I met the lawyer to sign the will and the letter of wishes. We kept it dull. I initialed the margins where the clauses live. I tucked the last page into the red folder behind a tab labeled will. I do not intend to read that part into a microphone. But if anyone asks me whether I plan to go public, I want to point at a sentence that is both public and private in the ways that matter, not on the internet. On paper. Filed. Witnessed. Witnessed again. The day before the awards. The co-working space sent their letter as promised. It said what the woman on the phone had predicted it would, without my guarantee. They would need Dornorth's updated financials at renewal. Failing that, the lease would not auto-renew. It used calm paragraphs that I have come to trust. I slid it under the tab labeled lease and added a sticky note, "Not my problem after renewal." It felt unkind. It felt necessary. I opened the pantry sign-up sheet and added my name to Friday's soup because kindness and necessity should be allowed to share a day. In the afternoon, I ironed my blue sweater because I am not the sort of person who shows up wrinkled to speak in public. I tucked my hair behind my ears and tried to decide if earrings would change the truth. They won't. I left them on the dresser and folded a handkerchief into my pocket. There is nothing glamorous about this preparation. And that is why it works. In the evening, I walked past the stadium where streetlights carve out little theaters on the snow. I thought about what it means to embarrass someone with the truth. The phrase sounds cruel if you forget the order in which things happened. I did not make a claim about my son on a stage. I signed a lease in a back office. I did not ask to be invited to an investor's mind. I cooked food so that other people's beds would feel like a place to return to. If his narrative wants to ignore that, I cannot help him hold it steady. But I can make it inconvenient for the narrative to keep a straight face when a piece of paper is standing nearby with its arms crossed like a mother who never raised her voice and stopped an argument anyway. The awards themselves are not a courtroom. They are a room where lights are hired to pretend they are excitement. I have no desire to ruin a night. I am not an arsonist. I am a woman who will ask during the Q&A a question that requires the business to behave like a business. What governance changes have you made as you move from friends and family support to outside funding? Specifically, are there any undisclosed guarantors or family-subsidized obligations that could affect Runway? I will hold nothing up but letters written by other people who used letterhead. I will narrow no eyes. I will not say, my son. I will say, the tenant. I will say, the discount. I will say, the guarantor. If anyone puts our faces together afterward, it will be because truth has a habit of matching edges, not because I tried to make art. Before I slept, I called Sister Boniface and told her I might be late with soup next week because of something tedious I had to do at the convention center. She chuckled the way women do when tedium is a way to keep a room from falling apart. We will keep the bread warm, she said. You keep your sentence short and your back straight. If you have ever needed advice, ask a nun. They will give you verbs and posture. I woke on the morning of the awards to a city that had tried on snow overnight and decided to keep it with 2 buttons undone. I made oatmeal because it is a breakfast that cannot be improved by adjectives. At work, I wrote the cooler temps with a hand that did not shake. I told the staff I would leave an hour early. They did not ask why. Or if they did, they asked in a way that meant they would manage anyway. On my break, I took the red folder out of the locker and set it on my lap like a lapdog that knows better than to demand attention. I looked through each tab the way I look through pans when I am making sure nothing has stuck. Bank, insurance, lease, card, will, schedule. I checked that my own name was printed on each page, that the dates were plainly written, that the words would not require me to explain anything in a tone I might regret. At 4, I punched out, walked home, changed into the blue sweater, and took the bus to the RBC Convention Center. The bus was full of people who had no idea they were sharing a vehicle with a woman who believed paperwork was more romantic than any speech. I smiled at my own joke and watched the city blur into itself as the windows fogged with ordinary breath. Inside the lobby, there was a registration table staffed by a woman who wore the name tag like armor. I picked up a lanyard that said, Community, because that was the closest thing to what I intended to do. I did not take a program. I do not need one to locate a microphone when it is doing the kind of work I expect it to do. I found a seat toward the back near the aisle so my leaving would not be an announcement. My red folder sat upright by my feet. An old friend who has learned to be quiet in public. The host thanked the sponsors with a sincerity that did not tax him. Awards were handed out to men who had not eaten all day and women who had. And everyone deserved better snacks. When they called Door North for a category I cannot remember because it was more adjective than noun. Adrian walked up in a jacket that still believed in him and a mouth that could convince a room to forget it is a room. He thanked people. He told a milder version of the story he tells on rooftops. He said the word bootstrap. It cracked a little on the roof of his mouth. I did not mistake that sound for remorse. I mistook it for dryness. Then came the part one had marked in my program that wasn't. Community Q&A. The host read the rules. They were the kind of rules that you write after one too many nights where people confuse grievance with microphone. Keep questions to the business. He said, no personal attacks. He pointed to the mic stand in the aisle. I stood. I carried my folder as if it might be heavy and gave my body the work of lifting so my voice could be light. Name? The usher asked. I gave it. He repeated it into his headset like I was an airplane that needed to land without fuss. I waited my turn. When the mic was in my hand, I placed the folder on the small ledge beside it like a book of hymns. My name is Nora. I said. Because it is. And because sometimes the shortest names are the most untouchable. This question is about governance and disclosure. I will tell you the rest later. Tonight's work is the packing of the folder. The carrying of it through a city that thinks warmth is a choice. The standing when called. The retrieval of 2 minutes from a room that would prefer entertainment to accounting. I will not argue with the preference. I will bring my own show, dates, signatures, and letters written by people who do not care about hashtags. The truth will be not me. That is the point. It cannot be embarrassed. Some endings pretend to be moments. They are not. They are corridors, fluorescent, echoing, lined with people carrying their coats and their verdicts. Some whispered, some folded into programs with sponsors on the back. If you want to spot the true end of a story like mine, don't look for the clap. Listen for the paper sliding back into a folder when a microphone has finished earning its wage. I learned that in a lobby that smelled like winter boots and hired light, the RBC Convention Center. On a night the Prairie Startup Awards wanted to be a party and I wanted to be a ledger. The usher's hand hovered near the microphone as if he could steady my voice by holding air. My red folder sat on the small shelf that someone, perhaps with mothers in mind, had attached to the stand. I could feel the weight of it in my forearms. An honest weight, like groceries chosen for soup. The host repeated the rules, 2 minutes. Business questions only. Respectful tone. It is a relief to be told what a room will accept. I nodded, not to him, but to my better self. My name is Nora, I said, and let the syllables be unadorned. This is a question about governance and disclosure. I did not look at Adrian. I looked at the air above the first row where people had decided to be important that night. As companies move from friends and family support to outside capital, what controls are in place to ensure all guarantors and subsidized obligations have been disclosed? And what is the plan to remove any family guarantees from leases by renewal? 2 sentences, no story. I had rehearsed the shape of them until they felt like a clean countertop under my palms. The host nodded. Thank you, he said, as if I had handed him a towel he could trust. His eyes skittered to the judge's table, then to Adrian, then back to me. The room made that sound that happens before a laugh or an argument, breath gathering itself. I opened the folder. Not dramatic. A hinge. A slide. No flourish. For context, I added, I'm holding a letter from a credit union confirming a guarantor's removal at lease renewal. And an insurer endorsement noting an address correction and the consequent loss of a household discount. I'm happy to submit both to the panel if that helps sharpen the answer. The question stands either way. The lights turned themselves down a notch. Or else my eyes remembered I was a person and narrowed on their own. Adrian stepped up to the lectern. A man with a nice tie and a face that could sell a future not yet paid for leaned toward the edge of his chair. Kelsey's expression performed neutrality, which is a hard part to play in a dress with sequins. That's a good question, Adrian said, the words he had trained his mouth to say whenever a room asked for proof. We've matured our governance. Door North is moving guarantees off family as we approach renewal. He glanced in the direction of my row and found the place on the wall where I wasn't sitting. We've filed updates with the landlord. We're transparent with investors. He did well, in the way a person does who has rehearsed the syllables for a life he is not yet living. The judge at the end, silver hair that had earned its opinions, took the mic. Thank you, she said, voice cut from cloth, not glitter. Follow-up, do you have any undisclosed liabilities dependent on the personal credit of relatives? Any discounts or benefits contingent on co-residency that have not been updated? Her hands rested on a stack of cue cards. She didn't look at me. She looked at him. Adrian cleared his throat the way a kettle coughs when it wants to be done. "We're in the process of removing any legacy stuff like that," he said. "We're good." The judge waited. "Silence is a tool." "Filing timelines?" she asked. "Before renewal," he said. "We have the letter from the credit union that," he stopped. The sentence couldn't find the middle if it had lost the ends. "We'll share documentation with investors." "Thank you," she said again, and turned her face back to the host with the half-smile of a teacher who has not graded yet. I stepped back from the microphone. The usher took it like you take a hot pan off a counter someone will forget is hot. I did not turn to measure the expression I might find on my son's face. I had brought the letters because I meant to free both of us from the theater of this conversation. Paper allows people to speak later, when their faces will not betray them to rooms. I returned to my seat overlooking the aisle, the red folder leaning against my leg like a dog that has no need to be clapped for. The ceremony resumed. Names were called. Photos were taken under lights pretending to like their work. I waited for the applause to grow bored. When it had, I stood, lifted the folder, and walked out into the cold. The corridor outside the ballroom has a carpet that thinks it belongs to nicer shoes. The lobby air was the temperature of a truth left on a windowsill. I could feel my breath becoming visible in the revolving door. A hand touched my elbow. I turned with my face already arranged into the politeness you owe any person who has not yet decided to be unkind. It was the silver-haired judge. Up close. Her earrings were small enough to have survived many days. "Ms. Belanger," she said, "thank you for an adult question. Please email your documents to the address on the program. Boring evidence prevents lawsuits." She smiled, brief and credible, and vanished back into the light. It was the only praise I wanted. Adrian did not follow me out. I imagined the wobble in the room when he found a place to sit. I felt the old pull to turn around and smooth it. To go back and arrange napkins and sentences into something that would let him keep both the jacket and his story. I stood still instead. The bus arrived, announcing its route like a confident old woman. I went home. I didn't sleep badly. There are nights when your pillow learns to be a jaw, wide and patient. This was one. The next morning, I wrote the cooler temperatures in my HACCP log as if the world had been waiting on them. In the slow hour between breakfast and lunch, a small stack of emails stepped into my day and stood there with the kind of posture that says, "We are not exciting, we are unavoidable." The co-working landlord wrote first. "We have received notice of guarantor removal at renewal." The letter said, "We require updated financials by date. Failing, lease will not renew." It was a paragraph written by a building that has seen too many people pretend they invented time. The judge's office wrote next, attaching the email to the program address. As discussed, please forward the referenced documentation. Thank you for keeping your question anchored in policy. I scanned the letters into PDFs on the hospital office scanner because it is a machine that behaves like a dog with a job. I sent them with a line, as offered. Attached. The tenant has a repayment schedule for personal charges. Lender letter confirms removal of guarantor at renewal. Insurer endorsement attached. I added no commentary because my commentary had already used its ration for the week. By the time I was folding aprons after the lunch rush, Adrian had texted. What was that? Not angry, not even scared, bewildered, like a man hearing that winter will arrive whether or not he likes its tone. A question at a public forum about a public business. I typed, then erased it for the same reason I have thrown out soup that almost tasted right. I wrote, "It was the truth in a room built for truth. Come by tonight." He replied with the sincerity he uses when he wants me to believe there are still days left where he is entirely my boy. Okay. He came at 7 with his jacket unbuttoned. Kelsey came with him. They brought the air of people who have been told by other people how to respond. She had a folder too, white, with tabs the color of optimism. We need to talk about what happened, she said, before her coat remembered that hooks exist. You sabotaged an important night. It was deeply unprofessional to ambush the team like that. I poured tea because both hospitality and heat were required to keep me from answering with a vocabulary I no longer admire in myself. Sit, I said. The word contained furniture and also an invitation to gravity. They did, reluctantly, like the chairs had filed complaints. I asked a business question about business. I said, you answered. A judge followed up. A landlord sent a letter. An insurer printed a stamp. These are not acts of sabotage. They are acts of adulthood. I slid across the table the copy of the repayment schedule he had signed with stew in his mouth. You are paying me back. You will remove my name from things that do not belong to me. You will use your address for your insurance because that is the address where your shoes live. I turned to Kelsey because the temptation to spare her had staged many rehearsals in my mind. I won't be managed, I added. I am not Brand. Kelsey inhaled like a person preparing a dive. Investors don't like messy family dynamics. She began. They like the founder to be self-made. They like a clean cap table. You put doubt in the room. I put facts in the room. I said. The difference between doubt and fact is the file it will sit in. Doubt needs a drawer with a lock. Facts go in a folder and make the drawer honest. Adrian watched our words cross the table like people from different countries trying to understand who owed the first apology. He said, finally, I thought I could handle it quietly. I thought the guarantor and the discount were small. They were temporary. I didn't think it mattered. It matters, I said, because your mouth borrowed a stage to say you did it alone. You didn't. I don't want payment for historical truth. That account is not the one I brought to you tonight. I want to stop being invisible in your affirmation. And I want to stop guaranteeing what you have chosen. That is love too. He put his hand on the repayment schedule as if to test the page for a pulse. He looked at Kelsey and saw, perhaps for the first time, how loud her assurances were in my small kitchen. He spoke softly. I'm sorry, he said to the paper. Then he turned the apology toward me. I'm sorry for hiding the ways you helped because I thought it would make me look small. I am sorry for asking you to be quiet so I wouldn't have to be honest. You see in these rooms how slowly dignity returns to the chair where you meant it to sit. It is shy after so long standing. I nodded because anything louder would have been theater. Good, I said. Start with Friday's transfer. Bring me your lease renewal documents next week. Find a cheaper space if the numbers cannot forgive you. Update the insurance yourself. Send the landlord your financials. Remove me from your address at the insurer. Do it because it is right. Not because the judge's earrings approve. Kelsey opened her white folder. It contained printouts of social metrics and a list of talking points the internet uses to convince itself that the future owes it an apology for arriving too slowly. She started to speak about narrative control. I picked up the kettle and filled her cup. You're a guest, I said gently. Guests are not obligated to solve the term mother in one evening. She took the hint the way a good dress takes a hem, quietly. When they left, I did not reward myself with victory. I washed the cups. I dried them with the good cloth. I slid the repayment schedule copy into the red folder under a tab labeled Schedule. Then wrote next to Friday's date a small square and filled it in when his transfer landed the next day. The square filled, black ink. Steady hand. There is a pleasure to those squares that I have not earned from applause. Consequences ripple at a human pace. They are not cinema. The co-working space sent a checklist a week later for renewal financials. Adrian sent his numbers and received a reply that invited humility. We can offer a reduced footprint. The letter read, or terminate at end of term. He chose the former. He moved 2 desks and a borrowed couch into a smaller room that looked less like a headquarters and more like the truth. He returned the keys with the kind of grace you discover when a landlord offers you no other option. He brought me the new lease. And I read it not because I missed being a guarantor, but because the muscles that read leases deserve exercise like any other. Insurance wrote again. As of date, the multi-vehicle discount is removed. It read. The premium crept like frost up a window. He paid it and didn't forward a complaint. He sent me a photograph of the paid receipt with a caption that said, "Adulting," which is a word I despise and accept because I am tired of fighting grammar when I have larger fights with numbers. The awards posted their photos. I am in none of them because a woman with a folder never makes a gallery unless the gallery is honest. Door North did not win a grant that night. But they were invited to apply again in a quarter with a governance memo attached. I don't believe in tough love as a brand. I believe in memos. Word got around as it does in cities that pretend they are bigger than they are. A delivery driver who knows my pantry soup said, "Good on you for asking a grown-up question." A church friend said, "Was that your boy on stage?" I said, "Yes." And then I counted how many chairs we would need for the coat drive. You can move your mouth away from gossip with practice. The will was signed. I went to the small office again with its plant that thrives on light more than care. We witnessed and initialed. The lawyer slid the final copy to me with a pen that did not leak. I put it in the red folder behind the will tab and then, at home, I put a copy in a drawer with a label printed on my label maker, Will and Wishes. I have never felt more like my father's daughter than in the moment a label maker tells the truth for me. I also printed the maple and mop policy sheet and laminated it at the library, where the lamination machine smells like school and guarantees. No name or logo use without contract. Prepayment for special event cleans. Proof of insurance from any entity filming. Or no filming. Keys stored in lockbox. Sign-out log required. I taped a copy in my hallway cupboard. The one the credit union manager had suggested. She is a woman who has known where to put policy longer than I have. Kelsey sent me an email 3 weeks later. It was short and close to decent. We've moved into a smaller room. We'll update the address. Thank you for supporting Adrian all these years. I'll make sure we don't imply otherwise. I answered with a sentence that might have seemed distant to a person who has not learned to survive closeness. Good. Best of luck. I did not add a heart. Affection has not left me. It has become honest backing for the stamp across an envelope. Adrian kept paying. Not always on Friday. There were 2 weeks where I filled in the box on Saturday with a sigh loud enough to qualify as percussion, but he paid. He dropped by on Sundays sometimes. We ate stew that needed no microphones. He asked more questions about the pantry than about investors. That is a kind of grown-up I can approve of without sounding like a mother trying to steal credit from a man she raised. I didn't forgive him. Exactly. Because forgiveness is not a theater trick. I did something I like better. I learned to like him again. I should tell you about the night in the church basement when I mentioned the trust to Sister Boniface because it is the kind of detail that will matter when you replay this for yourself later. We were packing boxes for the coat drive. She asked if I had thought what maple and mop might give after I'm gone. I said yes and told her. In the kind of quiet that attaches itself best to true sentences. About the trust. The percentage for the pantry. The preference for hiring women whose birthdays have taught them to keep their mouths shut in rooms where they could take charge in under 3 minutes. The no branding clause that requires anyone who uses my name to pay cash and sign a paper. She put her hand on my arm. You have given the future a chore chart. She said. It will thank you. It has been months since that night at the awards. The red folder is thinner by 1 stack of worry and thicker by 1 stack of proof. The cat sleeps like a creature that refused to be drawn into an argument and won by napping. The vine at the fence has forgiven me for pruning it. The hospital shifts keep their shape and the HACCP binder feels like a ledger of small decencies. There is sometimes a temptation to speak of all this as revenge. Perhaps you need that word to carry your own day toward a plan. But here is my final opinion. The one I have earned by stirring soup and holding microphones without asking them to love me. Calling the truth revenge flatters the lie. It makes it sound like you are attacking when all you did was open a blind. Embarrassment is the body's way of learning. It remembers public heat so that next time your mouth wants to borrow a stage it cannot afford. Your hands will pick up a pen instead. I do not want my son to be small. I want him to be exact. I want him to learn that self-made is not a moral category, it's a costume. Most of us are made by rooms, a kitchen at 5 in the morning. A bus at dusk. A credit union with pumpkins on the counter. A church basement where nuns label shelves and call that holiness. If Adrian has a future worth clapping for, it will be because he has learned to carry his own folder and to walk into rooms with letters that will let his mouth keep any promise it makes without borrowing from mine. If you have stayed with me through these minutes and their quiet paperwork, thank you. I make stories the way I make soup, out of what is on hand. Salt added when the pot asks. Nothing burnt. If any of this steadied you, if it reminded you that you are allowed to ask for adult answers in rooms that prefer excitement, please like this story. If you want more quiet, stubborn tales told by a mother who uses policies and pans the way some people use speeches, go ahead and subscribe. And I would truly love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been called embarrassing and had to respond with facts instead of fury? What did your paper say? Who signed it? If it might help a friend who is trying to hold her line with kindness, share this with her. There will be another story when the next season asks for a new rule. I'll be here, ledger open. Mop wrung tight. Kettle beginning to sing.